Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 15 and 16, aka the novelization of the Jin and Lee date from the Tale of Zuko. So this is an important one because of course this is Jin's main appearance in the entire franchise prior to this book. That the success of this character from this part of this episode is ultimately why now, all these years later, this book is actually happening here. So it's fascinating to see how the book approaches doing the direct adaptation, given that she's now going from being a minor character who we basically have no background on to we know a lot about her now, even at this early stage in the book. So interesting stuff, let's get into it. But just before I start, I'll mention that I have YouTube channel membership and Patreon available if you'd like to help support the channel. And if you come in at the higher tier, you'll also gain early access to other videos in this series ahead of time. But yeah, let's jump in here. So this is 2 chapters together. So interesting that they actually adapt the section of a whole episode across 2 chapters, admittedly quite short chapters, because a lot of this is mainly showing Jin's thought process throughout the whole build up to her asking him out, and then the actual date itself. And it's really interesting because you kind of see that the whole reason this ends up happening is almost like to prove the point back to like Xuan that I'm not disagreeable. Look, I can ask someone I'm kind of interested in out and we can have a nice time out on a date. I'm not like that. I can kind of have this thing. I can be hopeful for the future. Maybe it is with Lee. We'll see what happens. It's her kind of taking this kind of like, step into the unknown to a certain degree, because she is interested in kind of Lee kind of romantically, but she also just wants to know more about him as well, because there's the lingering thing over, oh, he was accused of being a firebender. Is that true? But either way, she senses that there's some sort of similarity in their kind of backgrounds that she wants to know more about. And we do get some very interesting details as we go through. So yeah, let's go through this here. So chapter 15, obviously she's just come back from the upper ring with the whole Makmu Ling thing. So the first section of the chapter is just her kind of like addressing that, like, I know I'm way too far out of the idea of having dreams to ever like live in the upper ring myself. Would I even want to do it? Seeing how people fight and scrape to try and get into those government positions, in her mind it's kind of not really worth it. It's just given her circumstances, that whole sort of thing. So she's feeling a little bit down as she goes back to Pow's to drink her tea in silence. There's some interesting kind of notes from her as she kind of goes through this situation of like she's beginning to notice that, like, is Lee maybe looking at me a little bit more than like he usually does, and she kind of sees that, oh, he doesn't really treat me that differently than anyone else. That's kind of just the way he is. So her confidence is kind of gradually going up and up and up. And then this is where we get her thinking about what Juan said kind of previously. Again, he stormed out. She was a little bit surprised that he got upset at her behavior, her attitude, and now she's trying to prove that that's not who I am, especially given what he implied about me: disagreeable, difficult to get along with, a loner. And she kind of explains herself, like, when I'm at the academy, I'm so focused on returning to my responsibilities, I barely pay attention to my schoolmates. But she then thinks about the Makmu Ling poem and the idea that, like, well, she seems to see something in me. The poem kind of implies good things about me. It is revealed that she did get the poem, the haiku, back from Chuan after that. But, there's that whole idea. She also tells him that, like, she is available for more work, of course. And she kind of thinks that, like, is that maybe a pathway into the future, like to go down the Makmu Ling route, whatever that might be. But yeah, she's fidgeting with her hair. He seems to be looking over my way a little bit more often. Is that just hopeful thinking? And she's kind of almost talking herself out of that at all. And then she remembers, like, Susu, the way Susu typically is. She has no problem whatsoever just going up to talk to people. And she decides, for Susu, I'm going to do this. This is for her. I'm going to prove that I can stand alone kind of without her. And this is what really gives her the last burst of courage to actually stand up and go over and ask him out on the date, which of course we see in the episode, Tales of Ba Sing Se, Tale of Zuko. This is where we get the direct kind of dialogue, you know, thank you for the tea, what's your name, my name's Lee, my name's Jin, thank you, I was wondering if you would like to go out sometime. And, you know, of course, Mushi says yes on Lee's behalf, and she's just very happy. And we get the idea that the reason she leaves so quickly is because just so he doesn't have the chance to change his mind, and she leaves the shop feeling like fresh, hopeful, like a new start, and that this could be a new kind of, you know, turning over a new kind of leaf for her to a certain degree, that this will present a new kind of pathway. And we get a little bit of a kind of background here as she prepares for the date. She just notes that she doesn't really have much in the way of nice clothes. She doesn't really have any accessories or anything like that. It's noted here that her mother was going to like give her kind of her box of like pins and circlets and stuff like that, but because of what happened, they're all ashes now. So she just dresses up kind of like the best that she can, and she's nervous, of course, waiting for this. And then she looks around the corner, and of course this is where she sees him with his hair kind of done up all kind of overly kind of formal, and you know, he looks presentable for me, it's sweet. And she does note that she prefers his kind of normally messy hair, which is why she kind of immediately messes it back up, of course. And, you know, she's just noting, like, hey, he's very serious. There's some awkwardness kind of initially here as well. And, yeah, she takes control of this. She's aware that she asked him out, so she kind of takes control of the date here, leading him to Quanming Square, to one of the kind of busiest kind of restaurants in town. Now, this is where we maybe have to address a little bit of continuity here, which is that this chapter directly refers to the idea of the restaurant that they go to is in the middle ring. The firelight fountain that they go to is in the middle ring, even though, like, prior to this book, everything that we knew pointed to the fact that it was in the lower ring. And it literally says that on the old Nickelodeon website about the fountain, but that's not actually the case. So they're slightly retconning this, mainly I think with the idea of, they seem to be trying to make it clear that if you're in the lower ring, you're allowed to pretty easily go into the middle ring outside of specific areas. That was the point that they were making about like Jin's first delivery, was specifically to the university, which is like specific grounds in the middle ring. Whereas otherwise it does seem like you are just allowed to, from the lower ring, go into the middle ring. It's more, what's really sealed off is access to the upper ring at all. So I guess this is maybe like part of kind of what they're doing here, is to just create that distinction of, yeah, people from the lower ring can easily go into the middle ring into the lower ring, but it's the upper ring that is the real distinguishing point from everything else. That's the main point I think they're making here. So yeah, we continue on with the date. You know, they're getting their food, and she's reflecting the whole time through of like on a lot of little moments, like especially thinking about her mother and father, because of course she's heard the story of how they met, their relationship, and she wants a relationship like that herself. You know, what was it my mother said when she first met my father? That when they first met, she was the friendly one and he was the shy one, but it didn't matter. There was always something to talk about. She felt an ease with him in a way she never had before. Maybe I would feel the same if I spent more time with Lee. Pretend. So she kind of forces herself to kind of get past her like nervousness and just to be the friendly one, to be talkative. And so this is where all the questions come out, where Zuko doesn't really know how to answer them properly. How do you like things in the city? And he just says it's okay. What do you like to do for fun? Nothing. And you know, the food arrives at this point. This is where the whole, would you and your girlfriend care for dessert? And he has the big reaction to that. She's not my girlfriend. And in response to this, it's just described that she gets a little bit awkward and starts kind of really focusing on her food and eating it. And this is when Zuko then goes, you know, you have quite an appetite for a girl. And she's like, oh, like, I didn't think I was eating my food too quickly. What's going on here? But then she immediately after this realizes that, like, oh, he's super nervous, just like I am. And it kind of changes things. Like, because I guess she was thinking up to now that, like, he just is standoffish, he's not nervous, that's just kind of how he is. But actually she sees that like he's fidgeting with his hands, he really doesn't know what to say. So like she's kind of in a way doing better than he is in this kind of situation. You know, and then we get to, you know, where were you and your uncle living before you came here? We've been traveling around a long time. And she notes that, you know, he skirts the question. And then the first of the 2 chapters we're covering here ends with, you know, "Oh," I exclaim, "how curious about that initial connection I felt when I saw him standing in the street, accused of being a Fire Nation spy. He seems reluctant to offer more of an explanation. Something terrible must have happened to cause them to flee. And though I'm filled with trepidation at finding out the answer, a part of me desperately also wants to know if my hunch is right." So that's the kind of cliffhanger before we go immediately into chapter 16, and we immediately continue. And we open up with, "We were part of a traveling circus." And he's like, "Really? What?" But she actually in her mind reflects on the idea of like, "Oh, like, I'm always been fond of the circus. You know, they would come to Da Ying every fall during the autumn festival. She's always liked the circus. She would sit on her mother's lap, eating there while they would go to the circus. So that's why she kind of is enthusiastic about this. It's not just that she tries to go along with it and be kind of positive. She actually is interested. But she does immediately get the sense that like he is kind of lying about this, but she purposely chooses to just kind of go along with it. And this is why she does the kind of almost weird part of the episode where it's like she, before he can even say what he does at the circus, is just like, "You juggled." So because she's aware he probably can't give a proper answer, and the idea that, you know, show me something. And the fact that he actually tries to do it and not give it, you know, come up with an excuse to not do it. You know, I'm the one who is speechless now, staring at him with an equal mixture of shock and amusement. I suspect he only went along with my guess to not disappoint me. But I'm still charmed that he tried to indulge me. So there's that kind of thing. But then, you know, after the kind of meal is done, you know, one more effort for me to see if there is truly a connection between us, just like Mama and Baba, so her parents. So yeah, this is where she's like, "I'm going to show you one of my favorite places in the city," which of course is the fire fountain. Of course. And then this is where it does specifically note here. We make our way through the streets of the middle ring, you know, to the fire fountain. And she notes here, "A small part of me questions then if I'm doing the right thing. What exactly am I looking for from him? A spark? A connection? To prove desperately that I'm not as disagreeable as Xuan says." I glance over at him and he seems different when we're away from the crowd. He's more relaxed. He gives me not quite a grin, but a little quirk in the corner of his lips, like he wants to be here with me. So Zuko's becoming more and more comfortable and more into it as the kind of date goes on, and that there is a little bit of a connection there. It's not just all her trying to make something happen. She is actually getting something kind of from him. So yeah, then they're making the way to the Firelight Fountain. She's kind of explaining the whole situation to him, how amazing it's potentially going to be. But yeah, they're not lit. Of course, she's disappointed when they get there. And she kind of feels like, is this kind of representative of like everything that's happened to me in the recent times? You know, is there actually not a connection? Is this the kind of proof of that? And it really does upset her, because it kind of connects a lot of kind of moments together of just what's actually happening here. But it, of course, reminds her of her parents as well. And it is a real kind of crushing disappointment in this moment to see that this is the kind of way it is. And it kind of hits her that like, oh yeah, her parents aren't ever coming back. Even in her dreams where she would imagine that her parents are still alive, no, the reality is they aren't coming back. And so it's actually Zuko at this point who kind of takes control in a way and is like, close your eyes, don't peek. And she goes along with it because she actually takes the opportunity to cover her eyes because she's on the verge of crying because of what this disappointment has kind of made her kind of think about. And then yeah, we just get from her as she has her eyes closed what she's experiencing here. I hear the scrapes of his shoes against the stones, footsteps moving away from me. Then there's a whoosh of wind, a strangely warm breeze, the sound of popping in the distance, one after the another, coming closer. Now you can look, and they're open. We get this scene here, where they are finally all lit, and it's this amazing moment for her where it's a complete like 180 in terms of how disappointed she was to how excited she is, and how, as we see as we kind of go forward, this changes the kind of dynamics kind of the day from multiple kind of avenues, because Zuko does this rather risky thing here and effectively firebending right in front of her. Obviously she wasn't looking, but you know, in her head she's not dumb. She comes up with an obvious logical thing of like, I know then, with the lights dancing in his eyes, that there may be a shred of truth to his accuser's words. There is no way for someone to light those torches so fast. So in her head, she's like, okay, yeah, he basically is a firebender. And we then get the idea of, okay, she's basically figured it out. Why isn't she like immediately like terrified, annoyed? Like, why doesn't she like reveal to him that she knows the truth? What's going on here? Why has she always been like more interested at just what that means rather than scared at like kind of what it means in a way? You know, I should be angry. I should accuse him of lying, and yet I remained there by his side in the quiet, watching the small boats float by on the water, a rare moment of serenity in the chaos of the city. And then she tells this very interesting little backstory back to when they were on their way to Ba Sing Se, and that this is why she doesn't immediately like think Fire Nation in general and immediately think kind of villain, and that everyone from the Fire Nation is an enemy, that sort of thing. On our way back from Da Ying to Ba Sing Se, my people accidentally stumbled upon a Fire Nation encampment. There were 10 of us in total, mostly kids and the elderly. We tried to back away and return to the road, but we were caught by a pair of soldiers. They could have dragged us back to the camp, taken us prisoners, but one of them held a finger up to her mouth, shushing us, while the other pointed out another way through the forest to avoid the rest of the camp. And this is why she, in this moment that she basically realizes Zuko is a firebender, doesn't immediately think the worst of him. All the things I believe of him may still be true, even if he might be a firebender, but it's obvious he's running away from something or someone that hurt him somehow. There are equally kind and terrible people throughout the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation and the rest of the world. And that's the kind of point here, is that like she is not a like Jet-like character in terms of like early Jet, in terms of what he did or planned to do. She can see the nuance between the idea of like, it's not just everyone from the Fire Nation is bad. In this case, these were actual soldiers who she should kind of view as being just inherently the villains, but they protected them in that kind of moment when there was almost no reason to. And if that's the case, then yeah, someone who has a scar on their face and clearly has something similar going on in their background, yeah, they might be a firebender, but that doesn't mean they're a villain in the grand scheme of things. And that's the very interesting kind of like part of that, is that like you would have never watched that episode thinking that that was what was going through Jin's head in that moment. So it really recontextualizes the scene quite interestingly. But then we're, of course, building to the kiss. My mother's words returned to me. I knew that your Baba was the one when we kissed. She laughed. There's a fun detail about this where it's revealed that like the father, every time the story is told, he always then kisses her on the cheek, declaring that he would make up for it for the rest of his life, that kind of like she had to be the one to initiate the relationship initially. And so, you know, Jin goes to do the kind of same thing here. You know, it's just a kiss. What would it kind of feel like? Will this kind of make the distance between us kind of closer? Of course, he initially interrupts the initial attempt with the coupon, of course. But then we see that right before she actually kisses him, there's an interesting kind of moment here. You know, even if I'm quickly realizing that Lee is another one of those dreams I had built up in my head, I wanted Lee to be my answer, two lost souls coming together, but that's not quite our reality. So that's the interesting kind of point about this, is that like we from Zuko's perspective in the episode, it's always been a sort of like kind of what if scenario of like, if Zuko did truly abandon his bigger destiny, he could have had this life in Ba Sing Se, and the Jin relationship might have been the kind of the future for him. But of course, we knew it was always going to come back to that destiny in some way. It was just about how he interpreted it. So it was always a case of, even as well as it kind of worked to a certain degree, it wasn't really quite right. And it's actually the same on Jin's side. This is not the case of like, this could have worked out for Jin if Zuko wasn't Zuko. Even from her own perspective, she kind of realizes that she'd almost built Lee up into someone that had been like a dream in a way in her head. And it's not awful, but it probably isn't the equivalent to her mother and father's kind of relationship kind of coming together, that sort of idea. But anyway, there's another side of him that he hides from the world. A part of him he's buried so far down he can pretend it no longer exists. But it will surface in time. Whether it's an inner turmoil or a secret longing, it will escape eventually. He will have to figure it out for himself, like I have to as well. He can't do it for me. And it's that moment of kind of realizing that, like, oh yeah, like they're not really going to be the ones to bear their secrets to one another. There is a secret with Zuko, but she is not going to be the person he reveals the full truth of it to, in the same way that she's probably not going to fully open up to him. But also it's interesting from the other romance perspective with Juan, where there's been some slight teases already. She also kind of has refused to maybe be open with him, but they're going to have to work together more, whereas this is more or less one of the last times Zuko and Lee and Jin see each other. This is where, I have something for you too, and she kisses him. Now, this is interesting, the actual description we get here. I go up on my tiptoes and touch my lips to his. Just a brief brush of our lips, and then it's gone. My way to thank him for this night, that I hope he finds what he's looking for. But to my surprise, I feel him kissing me back. My eyes snap open, startled. I see his shock as well. He backs up quickly. There's something stricken in his expression. What's wrong? When you go back and watch the episode, you see that when this is specifically happening, the kiss is mostly shot from over Jin's shoulder, so you don't see Jin's face when this is actually happening. So the whole idea of like, the way it does go is that yes, she kind of kisses, pulls back, he kind of goes in, and then they kind of separate. But the idea of like, her eyes snapping open because he does kiss back is kind of a little bit of a kind of new detail here. But yeah, he says it's complicated and I have to go. And then we end with it. Before his footsteps quicken to a jog and he disappears down the street like he was never even here at all. And that is how the scene ends here and how the chapter comes to an end. So it's an interesting one because Jin will reflect on this date kind of as we go forward. Just in the sense of like, effectively she basically knows at this point. She effectively went on a date with someone from the Fire Nation, someone who is a firebender. But it was a proof to her that, hey, she could have this actual kind of nice kind of evening. She's not disagreeable and stuff like that. But it's almost like that. The lessons that she has to take from this, she almost has to apply when it comes to like interacting with like Shuan and kind of some of the others coming out of this. And in the same way that like Zuko, when he goes home and says like it was nice, it's effectively sort of somewhat similar for Jin. Her takeaway is that like this, she knew kind of in a way, but as it was coming to an end, that this was not this thing that was going to be lasting, but it does mean a lot to her. She will remember this, and it's just a fascinating kind of recontextualization of this scene. And again, it is the foundational scene in that like without this book doesn't happen. Without this scene from this episode, we don't get this book, because this is how most fans know Jin as a character. So I thought this was actually really well done, and you can tell the effort that was put into these two chapters to make it work, while also not just being a straight adaptation, that like there is actual interest in seeing how Jin thinks as you go through this. So little bits and pieces like her reflecting on like she gets the confidence to do this and be the kind of one who kind of leads the date from Susu to prove that like she can stand on her own, but she also wants to prove something to Shuon because of what happened in the previous chapters. Those are nice kind of connection moments overall. Not to mention, again, they weave in the stuff from the website in of the significance of this location effectively to her parents. Again, with the context of the new information that it was the fountain in Da Ying versus the fountain in Ba Sing Se, but you know, the same core idea overall. So yeah, very, very fun scene. And now it's like, okay, we really don't have a lot of information on Jin after this moment. Like, what goes on from here? Obviously she wants to do more jobs, but you know, what's going to happen at this point? Because obviously it places us in time now where we know we're right in the middle of the Tales of Ba Sing Se. Meaning we're somewhat quickly getting close to Lake Laogai and some of the later parts of Book 2 where some of the bigger plot beats in Ba Sing Se do begin to happen. And so we're going to start to see some of that stuff weaving into play a little bit more as we go on. So that's the interesting kind of point here. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. How did you think they did the adaptation of the date here in the novel? But otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.